Using the United Club located in Jamshedpur as the main subject, this study analyzes the relationship between intentionality and the means and processes of production. It concludes with placing the club alongside a production value graph through the comparison of technological, formal, and aesthetic efforts as indicators of. Constructed in 1913, then known as Tata Institute, was built as a recreational space for TISCO employees. Clubs in the newly established towns started in response to the recreational and social needs of the heterogeneous communities comprising people from countries like America, Britain, Germany, and Indian cities like Calcutta, Bombay, and Gujarat. Their spatial programs and activities were mostly influenced by European and American cultures and lifestyle. Their needs gained precedence as they sat atop the company's hierarchy of employees. The clubs were built to accommodate a bar, dining hall, dance hall, card room, kitchen, billiards room, along with spaces for outdoor activities like swimming, badminton, table tennis. With a change in the demographic and lifestyle, spaces for more activities were added and redundant spaces were adapted to accommodate newer ones. For example, the addition of open air theatre in the United Club in 1965. Sometime before 1937, Tata Institute merged with CNR, the Chota Nagpur Regiment Club, and a nearby dance club to give the club its later name United Club. Originally, the club was meant for the Westerners in the Steel City. Later, it was open to the citizens of Jamshedpur in general, but mainly for the supervisors and officers of Tata Steel. This affected the exclusivity and the status of the club. Also a well-known dance club, it was listed as a sports club in the 1937 TISCO review. The original front and rear facade have been sustained, but the building has seen extensions to both its left and right. A load-bearing structure with a jack-arch roofing system and eclectic ornamentation, it has employed cast iron columns, an element truly unique to the club. This booklet presents a biography of the United Club by focusing on its three key attributes. Decoding the making of each attribute, it communicates key insights about the architectural production and its influences. This further reveals the complexities around the choice of material, technology, structural, and construction knowledge, and the multiple agencies influencing architectural production with respect to the time period and location under consideration. Amongst all buildings considered in the module, the use of cast iron columns is unique to the club. This element is used on the front porch and rear veranda, whereas the interiors make use of masonry piers. This could be attributed to the way cast iron columns proved to be extremely slender, improving sightlines when compared to masonry columns capable of supporting similar weight. Additionally, its malleability for ornate designs explains its use as a decorative structural element to emphasize the front and rear facade. The choice of and effort behind the application of these columns reflects an equal significance of both these exterior facades. Further, it suggests that the rear veranda was designed to be actively used by the club members. This is evident from a group photograph in the September 1947 issue of TISCO Review, wherein TISCO's chief engineer Mr. W. H. Ames was treated to a farewell event by the department staff. Comparatively, the use of masonry piers in the interior shows a decreasing aesthetic value from the exterior to the interior. In the United Club, each cast iron column has an entablature resting on the top. The rest of the base of the column is simple and the shaft is gradually decreasing from base towards the head. Also, the shaft is plain with a small section of fluting and moldings. The capital is decorated with acanthus leaf patterns and floral motifs. In contrast, the entablature is highly decorated with floral patterns. Each column has a square connecting plate at the top, which is connected to the base connecting plate of the entablature via bolting. The columns are used in groups of 1s, 2s, and 3s. This seems to be an architectural decision rather than a structural one. This is evident in the rhythmic arrangement of the columns in the rear veranda, where the 2s and 1s are repeating alternatively and the 3s are used to demarcate the front corners of the veranda. Thus, a lot of effort has been invested in designing the configuration of columns with the intention of demonstrating the architectural superiority of both the facades. The installation of these columns would have required skilled labor, as this isn't a standard material familiar to local labor, which also adds to the complexity to its use. Further, the issue of transportation in the unmetalled roads of the columns would have proved of the city would have proved to be complicated. Cast iron architecture grew after the Industrial Revolution popularized the use of iron. As the structural importance of iron in connections increased, so did the aesthetic value of ornate iron castings. To elucidate, the construction of Crystal Palace in 1850 legitimized iron as a desirable building material of the 19th century in the popular mind. Decorative cast iron acquired a strong association with exterior walls, enabling architects to design thinner and ornamental columns, ones that foundries could produce easily and economically. Possibly carrying these influences, the early inhabiting engineers and experts from America and Britain brought along to Jamshedpur. Moreover, at a time when Jamshedpur was climatically hostile and provided little to no respite to Westerners in terms of entertainment and sociability, greater architectural importance to the design of the club seems justified. In the early 20th century, cast iron columns were still being made globally for limited use. Jamshedpur was closely linked with Calcutta, a major trading post where a host of materials were imported from Britain and elsewhere. This could be the probable rail route via which a cast iron column came into Jamshedpur. An even higher possibility of acquiring these columns would be from the various Indian and European owned large and small scale foundries of Howrah, which started emerging early in the 19th century, along with columns for buildings, mills, and ornamental decor and ornamental columns. These produced a wide variety of iron products to be used in railways, shipping, engineering industries, and construction. Globally, the use of cast iron declined in the last few decades of the 19th century and then receded further. It was increasingly replaced by steel, an element with better structural properties, more efficient production technique, and economy. With the fall in the use of cast iron, its production as well as aesthetic importance diminished. This explains the lack of cast iron columns or elements used in other buildings of Jamshedpur. Keeping the scale of building in mind, we subsequently find ingenious methods being adopted in the construction of columns for clubs. For example, the brick columns in Golmuri Club. Analyzing the structural logic and influence behind the jack arch roofing system, I have attempted to decode its various configurations for the production of different scales of spaces in the United Club. To maintain aesthetic continuity, the configuration of jack arch is similar in the front porch and in the rear veranda, whereas the configuration of jack arch in the large front hall is different. This contrast must have risen when the usage of its space as a dance hall necessitated a larger volume and span. In the case of porch, the jack arches and the cast iron columns work together to facilitate the load transfer to the ground. The supporting I-beams are of a larger cross-section than the main I-beams. This could be because they carry all the load of the jack arches. The sizes are approximately 300 mm into 150 mm for the support beams and 150 mm into 100 mm for the main beams. Three support beams are most probably connected via bolting and are supported on the cast iron columns on all corners. The two main beams on the ends are resting on the support beams and extrude further to rest on the brick wall at the back, whereas the main beams in the center are supported on one end by the column and on the other end by the brick wall. By analyzing the configuration of the jack arches, it is evident that the width of the jack arch determined the width of the porch, while the length of the porch was free from the constraint. In case of the large hall, we find the same structural elements like the support beam resting on the side walls and supporting the main beams on top. Additional structural elements added here are transverse beams at regular intervals bolted to support beams. These would have been necessary to support the long units of jack arch to create an unhindered space, thus creating a space with large span and volume. Additionally, the lengths of the available I section could have dictated the placing of transverse beams and hence the regular intervals. Interestingly, this configuration acted as a two-way system which acts better in resisting uh, earthquakes, but whether this was known by the builders of the club or not can't be confirmed. Here too, the jack arches dictated the width of the space and were aligned with the walls. In other examples of jack arch usage, like in the Mrs. Perrin Memorial School built in 1915 and DAV School built in 1919, we find an alignment of jack arch with the walls. We don't find alignment in the of jack arches with the walls. This suggests that internal planning of spaces does not have any constraint if the system of jack arch as a whole is supported adequately. For industrial buildings in Europe that required large spans, the system gained momentum as appropriate roofing technology. During the Industrial Revolution, This system was developed in England and soon spread eastward. While investigating the viability of starting a steel industry in India by exploring the industrial parts of the United States and Europe, J.R.D. Tata must have come across Jackass roofing system in 1909. Moreover, the industrial town was established by experts and technicians from America, Britain, and Germany who were accustomed with the same. Moreover, with the establishment of the steel industry, the jack arch has been observed to be the standard roofing technology for buildings across Jamshedpur until World War I, post which we see a subsequent decline in its use for roofing to be replaced by reinforced brickwork. Being cost effective and relatively less labor intensive, jack arches were employed by the imperial government in India to build their infrastructure swiftly. A culmination of colonial research and appropriate roofing technology supported both British standard of living and local materials available. While the local artisans were well versed with brick construction, the Britishers were accustomed to using steel. It is worth noting that concrete at this time was still a fairly new technique in India. Cement was expensive and not easily obtainable. Jamshedpur had access to brick, cheap steel in the form of I-sections, labor from local Adivasis and neighboring cities, and technological know-how from European experts imported for establishing the town. Jack arches were first seen in India in the railway stations and its employee quarters as a result of waste steel in the form of double-headed rail joists, which accorded an economic incentive for using jack arch, which was a relatively simple technology. Thus, the technology that initially started for spanning large spaces and volumes was adapted for residential and public buildings as well. For example, Mrs. Perrin Memorial School built in 1950, C2 type bungalow built in 1918 and D type bungalow built between 1970 to 20. Gradually, this roofing technology was replaced by reinforced brickwork, which could accommodate different configuration of plans. It was inefficient and complicated to design in case of staggered plans. This is evident in the case of Mrs. Perrin Memorial School, where the jack arch roofing seems to have been compulsively arranged on the plan of the building and has a discord in its configuration. The eclectic ornamentation in the club is a clear case of significance of representation over other factors in the design of the building. The ornamentation is influenced by classical and Indian architectural elements prevalent in the architectural production of significant buildings by the colonial government. The elements from classicism include pediments, columns and moldings, and those from Indian context include chhajjas, brackets, chhatris and domes. The representation probably dictated choice of materials not in standard use like the cast iron columns. The buildings also feature elements common to other buildings during the time period like the arcade, parapet, chhajjas, and recessed arched windows. Thus, the building surface articulation is a mix of standard practices in Jamshedpur and eclectic ornamentation used to enhance status. Taking a part of the front wall, a better understanding of the articulation of ornamentation with the structural elements under focus, such as the parapet, precast chhajja, and precast brackets, comes forth. Probably the repetitive brackets and chhajjas were precast on site, adapting the units according to the plan of the building. Moreover, it may have been easier to cast them on site rather than transporting them from outside of town. The chhajjas would have been precast with an additional width closer to that of the wall so that they could be rested over the wall. The construction of wall over them and the placement of brackets under them added to their stability. This shows that the brackets that had both ornamental and structural role to play. Comparison of the parapet of the United Club with that of the Mrs. Perrin Memorial School demonstrates that it could have been employed as an ornamental element to enhance the status of the club during that time period. Although the United Club had access to the terrace via staircase on the side, it is improbable that it was used for activities of any significance, mostly owing to the climate of Jamshedpur. Then the functional aspect of providing a parapet wall becomes redundant. This then shows that the parapet was probably employed to further enhance the aesthetics of the club. A similar design of parapet wall has been employed in Mrs. Perrin Memorial School. In this case, the parapet walls have relatively lesser molding, showing that it could have been a standard construction practice. Additionally, the school was a memorial which hints at the choice of constructing an ornamented parapet as being intentional rather than practical. The complexity in the production of the surface articulation in the club demonstrates its high value during the time of its construction. This is supported by the fact that it was originally designed for the Westerners atop the hierarchy of employees in the steel industry. Moreover, its value is also evident in the name given to the club originally, the Tata Institute. This further elucidates the significance given to the representation of the club. It is evident that the design of the club was intentional in order to project the building's architectural superiority in terms of aesthetics and high status in terms of use of space. The club lacks employment of any ingenious construction techniques or material, except the cast iron columns, thus its high value lies in its surface articulation only. The clubs which were established later, like the Beldi Club and the Golmuri Club, do not surpass the aesthetical complexity of the United Club. Also, no other building in Jamshedpur employs this level of ornamentation in their facades. Subsequently, the use and social value of the club declined as it became accessible to the general employees and their families. It was no more a club exclusive to the Westerners. Moreover, multiple clubs exclusive to ethnicities and countries of origin started emerging. The comparative evaluation of elements of United Club vis-a-vis its value reveals that both the front facade and the cast iron columns were high in value and continue to remain so. The rear facade comes next as it has been closed from all sides, restricting its visibility. Additionally, a room was added over its roof which decreased its aesthetic value. The side faces where facades were relatively low in value in terms of representation originally, but now its value has decreased as new extensions have been added on both sides. This also decreases its original functional value because of the presence of open arcade. The jackash roofing are low in value as they were standard methods of practice for spanning roofs. Although no attempt was made in hiding the profile of the arches on the facade, which could be either an aesthetic choice or a construction anomaly due to the surface articulation of diverse elements. The ornamental elements like the parapet, chhajas, and the bracket are comparatively higher in value than the roofing as they add to the aesthetics of the building, in turn demonstrating architectural superiority and status. Thank you.